what the podcast has shown is there's no one way to go about running an operation and running an agronomy team. Like, there are different ideas, there are different perspectives, there are different situations for everybody involved. And again, I know I keep coming back to something like this, but it's okay to have those different perspectives. And I think we all want to, whatever aspect we're talking about, we want to pigeonhole ourselves into one particular thought process. And I think the podcast has done a really good job of showing the different perspectives that are out there, the different ways of doing things that are out there. And hopefully that's allowed people to try different things and find their own comfort zone.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Excited to be talking today with one of our team members, Mitch, who is just coming up on 6 years. Is it 6 years?
5 years.
5 sorry. Man, 6 years as a company, 5 years. So we appreciate that. And kind of today's podcast episode, which is also coming out, U.S. Amateur Week at Marion. We'll have had the chance to spend the time with the team there. Pretty excited about the Amateur at Marion. Obviously, rich tradition club of championships, and golf course seems like, as expected, pretty dialed up. So it'll be fun to watch that. But for us, it's an exciting time. Thinking about the company for 6 years, obviously a nice little anniversary, not just for Mitch, but Ryan as well. Ryan's kind of in the same boat, 5 years. So kudos and congrats to you guys for putting up with me for 5 years.
It's a harder task than I ever could have imagined, Tyler. I should have been forewarned when our first interview was at a Cracker Barrel that this was going to be different than everything else that we had ever done before. But it's been amazing spending a little time this morning, kind of reflecting on where we were then. And I should say where you were then, because it took a good while for me to get my feet comfortable, in what it was we were doing and where we are now. Two totally different places. And we say that all the time, as new things come on, totally different places. But it's, as I expressed to you the other day, this is as much fun as I've ever had going to work over the last 6 months, just because of how exciting it is, how busy it is. It's been a lot of fun, man. I've really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. You've been a part of the evolution here, good, bad, and different, and everything in between. It's gone a lot of different turns, but I'll just give some people some context here. Not to make this a total episode about Bloom Golf Partners, but when we first started, I think, Mitch, I think I talked to you about just needing some administrative support, with some of these jobs that went on. I don't think we necessarily saw it in maybe the more formalized way it's become, from a process standpoint, overall brand, overall, candidate experience, and some of the things we're going to dive into on the podcast today. But it really was pretty basic, but kind of curious from your viewpoint, what you think about that. What were those beginning stages like, and what was your interpretation of what we were jumping into?
I didn't know what I was jumping into when I jumped into it. And I knew I needed a change in my professional career. And I had known you for, by that point, what were you, 32 years old? I've known you for 15 years, something like that. Yeah. So, and I knew it was something I wanted to be a part of, even if I didn't know what I was getting into. I learned how much I don't know, and I'm still learning today how much I don't know. And it's dawning on me quickly now how much I do know, and how much I've learned over the course of 5 years. The conversations that I have when I sit down in an interview and I can have those conversations that I could not have had 4 and 5 years ago. It's that's where the growth for me has been more than anything else, is just being comfortable in those conversations. There are still times when folks are talking over my head. And as soon as we're done, I'm running to the Google machine and trying to figure out what it was they were talking about. But I've learned so much over the course of 5 years. I've learned so much about the interview process. I've learned so much about the industry, about agronomy. I identified nut's edge in my yard the other day, just without even thinking about it. My wife's like, "How do you know that that's nut's edge?" And I said, "Let's not get into that." It's one of those things. It's fun. It's fun to see how far we've come.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for those that are listening, give yourself credit. Mitch, you know more than the average superintendent in many cases, and it's just
there's not a chance. There's not a chance that's true. Yeah.
All kidding aside, but no, it's been really cool, and I think that's been somewhat fun. I don't know if I really thought about that when I first started the company, is like being able to really share that passion for the industry and sort of the uniqueness, And I think for a period of time, just had hesitation on not making actually our employees feel uncomfortable being put in that spot. But the more I realize, the more they're engaged, the better that they'll do, the better the conversation, the better the service, the better the product. So, and it's the same thing with Ryan. I think just being able to have those conversations with employers and really kind of understand what are the key differences when they're evaluating, whether it's assistants, equipment managers, and AIT. And it's funny, I think one of the comments that I always make periodically is, I think we're actually training the employers at times what they should be looking for based on the market. Because most people, I think, and be curious, your comments, similar to me, came up, sort of wanting to be a superintendent, but a lot of people came up by happenstance and career changers. But a lot of them evaluate, hey, the kind of assistant I'm looking for is the assistant I was at XYZ club. And that, I think, has shifted in the market, and just kind of curious your thoughts on that from what you say.
So like the one thing that I've noticed, especially over probably the last, 6 to 8 months, maybe to a year, as we've gotten really deeper into the superintendent director side of searches, is that during the process of a search, the goalposts are going to shift on the hiring committee, on the general manager, on an owner. Of what it is that they're looking for. And I think the thing that I want to tell, and this is something I have written down, I wanted to talk about on LinkedIn, in the next few weeks, was that's okay. Like, it's okay to to understand that what you want, what you need, what the club needs is going to adjust during that search process. But when you're working with a group like ours, that adjustment has to be communicated so that we can adjust what we're looking for, adjust how we're going about the search process. So like the big thing that I would tell people when they get into that process, even if they're not using us, if they're going at it themselves, it's okay to have that adjustment as you go through the process. And what you thought you needed, which might be somebody coming from a big name club, big name experience previously, isn't necessarily what you need now. And you're open to the idea of an up and comer fitting into that role, so that's one of the big things that I've learned, is that those goalposts are going to shift. But if you don't communicate what those shifting goalposts are, that's when a search can become frustrating on both ends. I should say from 3 ends, from the candidate side, from our side as the recruitment side, and from the side of the hiring manager.
Mitch, are you talking to me about our company, or are you talking about the
No. We work on a sliding scale, Tyler. Like that's the one thing Tyler, Mary, and I and Meredith have adjusted to over the years, is our goals and our visions are going to change over time, and we've learned how to roll with those punches.
Yeah. Well, for those that are listening today, before we started recording this podcast, I texted Mitch and said, "Hey, do you want to join on a podcast?" I don't think he was ready to join that. And I said, "Hey, do you have the questions?" And he's looking at me like, "What questions are you talking about?" And that's pretty normal for me. So on par.
Well, it's like dealing with my wife. She sends me 3 text messages. I only read the first one. So the other stuff is just information that's not necessary. Turns out this time it was necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the patience as I'm all over the place some days, but no, you're right. I think the goalpost does shift for businesses. It even shifts for the employees. I mean, I think of so many searches where, look, let's call it what it is. If an existing employer finds out about an employee interviewing, most likely if they value that person, they're going to come back to the table with some sort of an offer, maybe even before they get to that final in-person stage. So I think that those are things that is more common. I think what maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago, I would be kind of the person that would get really upset about that. I think the employers would get upset about that, but I think that's just reality. So like even in a recruiting process, just that might shift for somebody as to why they may stay engaged and may not. Now, I think a lot of employers look at it as somebody's taking advantage to get a pay increase. And it's like, well, maybe, but on the same token, that's the situation. You got to play with the cards you're dealt with.
There's two parts to that, Tyler, and we see it. Like we can see the people who apply that are not necessarily interested in the job, but they're looking to use a potential offer as leverage where they currently are. They don't want to leave where they are. We see that's not a hard thing to see as we go through that process. And I don't fault those people for doing that. Like that's capitalism at its finest, have at it. On the same side of that too, the second part of that is I tell people this all the time, from interviews for AITs that we do all the way up to the director superintendent side of things. We're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing us to make sure it's the right fit for you. And I would tell people that getting into the wrong job, is a far worse thing than not getting into a job. So make sure that if you go through that process and you decide this is not the right next step for me, this is not what I thought it was going to be. We run into people that are chasing those bigger jobs, and we've been doing a lot of those bigger, higher end courses, that we've been working with lately. And people think that's where they want to be. They get into it. They visit it. They look around, they talk to people, and it turns out it's not exactly what they're looking for. And that's fine. Again, it is fine to step back and say, this isn't for me. I'm going to remove myself from this.
I find at times it's interesting, and maybe you see this too, is the golf and private club industry. It's special. Really enjoy it. Really unique kind of employment situations, employment settings. But there are times when I think that we take things too personally, because of the nature of the industry. And a lot of times it's just a business, it's employment. And I don't know why that is, right? I don't know why that kind of vacuum is created and there's sort of that expectation, but it's something that I would really sort of talk with employers about that are listening, to sometimes think about that and take a step back. It's not curing cancer. It's important. It's important to be prideful and have passion. It's important to respect sort of the brand, the logo, and the people that are a part of that, because those members and those golfers, have those expectations, and there's a level of that privacy. But I think in the same token, though, as it relates to what I think we see at times of challenges with employees, is this industry sometimes takes itself a little bit maybe too seriously, and as if the commonalities of common business and common employment doesn't apply, to this industry. And just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you've been inundated in it now for 20 years, in the industry. So like those things that happen are natural to you, and then for somebody like myself and Ryan McNally, who are outsiders, we are not of the industry. We have come into the industry. We can look at those things and go, this is weird. Like, why are we thinking about things this way? And I think that's something that him and I can bring to the industry as we talk to people and say, like, well, put yourself in their shoes. Like, are you going to go take a job at another club if you know throughout that process that it is not the right fit for you? Like, why would you be upset that they're withdrawing their name from this search if they figure out that it's not the right fit for them. So I think that's one of the things that Ryan and I have been able to bring is an outsider's perspective. Our perspective is not necessarily always right. It is not always welcome. It is not always fit with the way things have been forever within the golf industry, but I think we have a different perspective on things. And it's good to bring those perspectives to the forefront so that maybe we can think about things a little differently and maybe some of those things get adjusted.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's something I've always really respected is just kind of the blends of those industry, non-industry components of what the team brings to the job. It's different. It kind of keeps me a little grounded, probably more so than anything. And I think that's really important. It's just a good message to share with employers. So kind of transitioning topics a little bit. One of the things that as a company and something I've always just wanted to do, and for different various reasons, whether it was timing, let's be honest, resources, maybe just a little bit of maturation of the business and just kind of seeing where Bloom Golf Partners sort of evolves to. One of the things that I've always really wanted to offer is some level of education. And that education could be delivered online or in person. Obviously, in-person events, there's just a level of intimacy and there's a level of engagement that you just can't get over a Zoom. You can't get over a Teams meeting or Google Meet or some, platform, but it's something I've always really wanted to do. And I am super excited today to talk about our Leadership on the Links Summit, which will be October 12th. In a very short time frame, 2 months at Toff Trees Resort here in State College. Really excited about that. And we picked that date, and I picked that date really for 2 reasons. One, I just feel like it's a great way. The end of the season's coming for those in the North, kind of right before the kickoff of the season for those in the South. And it's just a really good place to, I think, in a time frame to kind of get refocused, recentered. And it's also right in front of the Penn State University Turfgrass Job Fair scholarship outing. And there's actually essentially like a learning lab infield component too, up at the research center. So really excited to, have this event this year and take a few minutes. I'm going to talk about kind of the setup for those that may be interested. And this is really designed for golf course superintendents and their assistants. Certainly could see equipment managers coming. I could see a general manager. I could see a golf professional, but the education is really designed for agronomy leadership. And my goal and hope is that they can come out of there with one conversation, one leadership tactic, one recruitment tactic, and a different perspective and a network of very like-minded people who are just trying to elevate themselves in some capacity. And, this is going to be basically an 8 to 2:30 kind of day. There'll be a good mix of between speaker, panel discussion, and a little bit of engagement with other attendees there. So we feel like it might be a slightly different education platform than people are used to. We will have GCSA credits. There'll be lunch. There'll be breakfast. We're looking at possibly a social networking aspect in the evening, but really excited about that. We've had a lot of interest already. Registration details actually are live. You can go on bloomgolfpartners.com and go to the events page and you'll see where you can sign up. Really simple. You can go on, put your credit card in, sign up for yourself, bring your assistant. We are rolling this out at $197, but for the first 20 people that sign up, we're going to discount that to $147. So we'll have information about lodging and all those aspects. So looking forward to that. But most importantly, I can say here today that we have a really special keynote speaker. If anybody knows me, if anybody knows Mitch, you know that we both are diehard wrestling fans and not talking just WWE. We're talking to amateur style wrestling. And I am super pumped to say Cale Sanderson, the head wrestling coach at Penn State, Olympic champ, undefeated wrestler, also a big Pokemon card fan, will be the keynote speaker for the event.
Don't forget about Kale's cookies, and I hope he's bringing some because I hear they're amazing.
Well, that'll be one of those little special treats for all the attendees. As part of this is that if you come, you will also get opportunity to taste out Kale's cookies. So I'm super pumped, man. I mean, I know that wasn't a Jason Kelsey introduction or anything, but super pumped. I mean, that in of itself, price of admission, let alone getting to see us and getting to network with people, just to kind of listen to Kale talk about how he's developed the culture there, retained a culture in a really interesting environment, not much different than what I think most of what we're seeing on the recruiting side and what clubs are dealing with. So I think it's going to be pretty special.
You know, there are not a whole lot of things that I have in common with an Olympic champion athlete. But one thing I can say is neither Cale Sanderson nor I have lost a college wrestling match before. So like I'm really excited to be in the same room as somebody with a similar experience, you know. But more than anything, like I can't wait to hear him talk about how he's built the program, the wrestling program at Penn State. I should say revitalized the program at Penn State. And the culture that he's built there and the retention that he's built there in this transfer portal, NIL kind of era of college athletics. I can't wait to hear the things he has to say. And I've sat in press conferences with Cale before, more times than I can count over the years. He's just a smart, thoughtful, insightful individual. And I hope he's able to get into some of those ways that he's built the team around him.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of how I saw this too, as kind of the capstone of the day, you know, talking about personal development, team development, and then to have somebody like Cale, who, I mean, outside of Nick Saban and John Wooden, I'm not quite sure there's anybody in any athletic venture coaching that has done what he's done. You know, or I think of Oregon, track and field, things of that nature, but you know, what he's done, and we're living in the moment, you know, what is Penn State wrestling. So, and for my friends that maybe aren't big wrestling fans, I think the day is really built around that connectivity, engagement, and learning from other people. It's always kind of been something I think is really special about this industry. And so to do that in person, I think is going to be really fun, and get to meet a lot of our friends of Bloom Golf that have really kind of shaped our company, and meet some new friends too. So like I said, more details on that, you can go to bloomgolfpartners.com, our events page, easy sign up. You can also listen to the comments or look in the comments here in the podcast. We'll have a link for you to sign up. So that's kind of big thing coming here in October. But, you know, part of that also came from a pretty deep discovery back in the spring. And again, it's an annual discovery of what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think as we really look at from a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where we're at today, I think the one thing that's been consistent, but probably much more formalized, much more, I think is part of our company brand, is just really elevating agronomy. And that's really where our focus has been. It's where our focus is going to continue to be. And that's not to say that there aren't times that we'll support clubs in other recruiting projects, but by and large, we want to serve superintendents and the agronomy teams through their club, because I think it's really needed. I mean, that's been sort of really the big aha for me in the last year, maybe 2 years, is I'm just shocked at how many clubs don't understand what it takes to build not necessarily a world-class agronomy operation, but just the best agronomy operation that they can for their specific club. And there have been some really tough conversations I've had to be in on and listening. And when I say tough, for me, it's more of the lack of education, the lack of awareness that the own clubs have about their agronomy team. And it's so surprising. But that's something where I think I'm very comfortable putting our flag down and saying, this is what we're about. This is what our focus is. That is not changing. Of course, there's some fun activities that are going to be a part of it. And there's probably some different advisory services that come, but we are by and large agronomy focused. And I think this summit is sort of that real true launch to here's who we are, here's what we're about, and here's what we're going to continue to build and support. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's not that we're not able to do the one-off and other things. I just don't know that that's our niche at this point. And I think, we've had that discussion that down the road, there are going to be other aspects of the company that maybe handle that. But that is what we grew up on, so to speak, as a company. That is where we buttered our bread as a company. And I think the more we've tried some other things, the more we've realized that that's who we are. And that's where we can have our biggest impact on the industry, is from the agronomy side of things. I think clubs understand, like, as I've sat in some of these conversations, I think they understand the financial side of what it takes to tend to their golf course. I don't know that they always understand the human side of that. And what that takes from a people perspective, and the type of people that it takes, to produce the conditionings and the facility that they want to produce. And, they see it in terms of dollars and cents, and not necessarily in terms of the people who are making those decisions. So hopefully we can have some impact on that. And I think in some of the discussions that we have with hiring teams, with greens committees, with general managers, that we're opening up that conversation and that idea.
Yeah, I think in talk about that a little bit more. I find it's a struggle even for the superintendent to maybe get those points across to their club leadership. And the most dangerous thing is an uneducated GM or an uneducated golf pro or an uneducated board member. And so I think part of our ethos moving forward, not that it wasn't before, but a real focus point, is continuing to educate not just the superintendent, the assistant, but how to educate up and educate to that board member, to the GM, to their golf pro, build that better cohesion, because I think that's really important. And I think clubs ultimately want that. But they also want a leader. And I think that's everything we have really tried to do. Not perfect. Certainly we have still our own aspects of trying to do a better job in that aspect and in the services that we provide. But I think it's important that superintendents have an outlet. And I think the podcast has really served as that. It's one thing, if I have a good reflection on, I've been somewhat shocked. And I share this story. We were out to dinner. It was like a week or so ago. And I had somebody come up to me and they said, "Wait, are you Tyler Bloom from the podcast Leadership on the Links?" And you got it. I just started laughing, like, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
But amazing to hear how this podcast has really been shared with people beyond superintendents. And by this, we're not being Joe Rogans. We're not going to be, top podcasts in sports necessarily. Well, maybe we'll shoot for that, but I think that the whole purpose has been to help superintendents and educate them, but also give their stakeholders education, which I think has been really fun. Podcast has been very central to me. I've spent a lot of time on this. There's been a lot of internal work on what the podcast should look like, the production, and I think that's really cool. And that'll be, again, another thing that I think we get to share in October is many of the people that have been on this podcast are going to be there in attendance, and get to share some of the cool things behind the scenes that they don't see with our company as well.
Yeah, I think what the podcast has shown is there's no one way to go about running an operation, and running an agronomy team. Like, there are different ideas, there are different perspectives, there are different situations for everybody involved. And again, I know I keep coming back to something like this, but it's okay to have those different perspectives. And I think we all want to, whatever aspect we're talking about, we want to pigeonhole ourselves into one particular thought process. And I think the podcast has done a really good job of showing the different perspectives that are out there, the different ways of doing things, that are out there. And hopefully that's allowed people to try different things and find their own comfort zone.
Yeah. I think the one other thing that I'm really proud of what we've done is, yes, we do are primarily with private clubs and golf courses, but we also serve, whether it's manufacturers, distributors, other consultants, other architects, and bringing that sort of network in, I think is beneficial, for the industry as a whole. And I think that that's something that will be fun. So at the event as well, if you're somebody that's not a superintendent or not an assistant, but you want to come in and be in a room full of kind of movers and shakers and be a part of that conversation, we invite you to. Because I think they're part of the conversation as well. And I think of a recent search, and I won't name it, but I think about how the vendors and exhibitors and other consultants really kind of get behind certain candidates, how they really get behind certain clubs during a process. And I think that's consistent everywhere, but I think that's awesome that you have that sort of communal impact, and a fraternity, or, how you look at it, a fraternity of a sort that the industry as a whole supports each other, which does make it really kind of unique. We talked about that to start off the podcast. It's a kind of a weird industry at times, but this is a positive about it. And
it's not a whole, yeah, it's not a whole lot different than the wrestling community that I've been a part of for 25 years. As a journalist covering high school and college wrestling, it's a very niche, kind of community, but the community is very tight. And it feels like everybody knows everybody, and there's a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing with everybody. They know somebody who knows that person that I know. So it's good to get in there. Like you said, if it's not an assistant, if it's not a superintendent, get into that room and see how people think, see how they talk about the industry and the issues that they're facing. It's a good thing to be a part of.
Yes. And not to go on a full, campaign here, but if you're looking to sponsor, you want to play a small part and make that a great experience for people, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk and see how we can customize something specifically for you. But thinking about tying this into some of our research and maybe a little bit of ethos around the event, around the company, one of the things that's been consistent, and I think you and I've talked about this a lot, is just networking. And having access to a network. Everybody thinks their network is really good until you find somebody else that their network's even better. So I think that if you are an aspiring professional that feels like you might be stuck, you feel like you might be hitting a wall, sometimes just getting into a room, whether it's this event, whether it's a GCSA, whether it's at your local association, doesn't matter. It's an opportunity to surround yourself with people that think differently and have different exposures. And I think a lot of that self-awareness around that is such a key motivator. And I can think of probably a dozen people right now that maybe I've had a conversation, or you've had a conversation with, didn't get a job. They were dejected. They were frustrated. And we talked to them about exposure, and we talked to them about getting into a room with different people. And then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, their career trajectory has been changed. And that's a self-reflection for me that maybe as well, looking back on when I started the company to now, I don't take that for granted. Mm-hmm. I probably didn't recognize that network of who we have access to and that exposure. Not that we're better than anybody else. That's not it. But that exposure can really change the trajectory for somebody's career. Now we've seen it even with the people and the candidates that work with the clubs we've served. I think that that's a key part and some of the research that we found people are looking for.
I think too, what I've found is as we've gotten more involved in the superintendent director side of things, but I hear it even on the assistant level as well. People are hungry for feedback on what it is they're doing right and where it is they have holes that they could plug up. When we get done with these superintendent searches and we let people know the decisions, I always offer up, if you're looking for any feedback or if you want to sit and talk about the process, I'm happy to do it. And we're probably at like a 60 to 70% clip right now of people saying, I want to know anything that you're willing to tell me about this. And again, it just gets them thinking differently. Maybe something they hadn't considered before. It's being self-aware of your limitations, of the skill sets you have yet to build. And it allows them to approach things a little differently for the next time. And how many times have we seen it, Tyler, that guys we interview that aren't a right fit for this first job, 2 or 3 jobs later, we're finding them where they are a fit. And being part of that network. And I think in craving that feedback and those conversations are what helps kind of springboard them into that.
Yeah. So as I think about this in general, in the vision and the direction for a company, when I think of education, this is an annual thing that we hope to do every year. I feel really good about it, very positive about it. But I think post this event, I think there's opportunities, and we've talked with so many candidates that ask and employers that ask, hey, is there any other support mechanism that you can offer, whether it's career development, career services, thinking about team development? And the answer is now, I think officially for me, yes. So post the conference, we will be launching Bloom Golf Partners professional development platform. And that platform is really designed for constant interaction, consistent interaction with other industry experts, other industry professionals, going through the same challenges, and trying to navigate team dynamics, trying to navigate career dynamics. We will have certain tools in there, monthly engagements. So it's hopefully our goal then to bridge that gap between, this October and next October, different conferences with sort of that more consistent touch point, with people that are looking for that sort of feedback. And and it's been a struggle, I think, in general. How do you support a larger audience of people that want those career services or want that team dynamic in a capacity that's, easily digestible, easy for them to consume, maybe not just a once-off conference, but something more consistent. So that'll be something as well we'll be launching kind of post that summit. So if you don't get a chance to attend, and you want to be a part of that conversation or part of that community, it's something I'm really excited for. And we're going to take it slow. Like, this is not going to be something where we're going to promise that we're going to solve all the world's problems and career problems within 1 month. I think it's just an evolution and part of the conversation that we want to have with people that really trust and like what they're hearing.
I want to start a literal conversation, not just a figurative one. With the things that we're talking about, I want people to interact with us. The things that I've kind of become more cognizant about, posting on social media, are things that I want to start conversations with. I want you to share with me your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, your disagreements, with my opinions on things, because we want that conversation is a good way to go about things. One of the questions I like to ask people, because I'm so involved on the interviewing side, is what is your greatest fear going into a job interview? Because if I hear what the things are that people fear, well, then how can I help ease those fears as we get into a job interview, as I sit across the computer screen or across the table from them? Those conversations open up opportunities to be better on both sides, from my side and from your side.
Yeah, I think, as a note on that, I think one of the things that's been shocking to me, or surprising on, maybe not disappointing, but shocking on the interview fronts, is how fearful people are. And actually how people are always thinking about who else is interviewing. Don't even worry about that stuff. You got to focus on you. There's enough in that. You're trying to polish up that conversation about making yourself shine. Don't worry about some of those other things, because they're really hiring you, the person. And I think the more time and energy you spend on talking about and preparing for your own interview and what you bring to the table, the less, confusing it is, and you kind of get yourself a little bit focused. But I've heard that a lot from candidates, just being a little bit fearful of the process. And sometimes it's just, they don't know what to expect. And then they go through it and they're sort of like, man, I got myself worked up over nothing. And I was worried about all these other things that have no impact, actually on the interview process, on the search process in general. So I think those are some things too that we'd like to share, whether that's in person through the podcast or, our community coming up. I think that those are things that are fun to talk about.
It's hard to get people to be their authentic selves. Because everybody wants to present themselves in a light, to where they can get the job. But I tell people all the time, it's like, cause I like to play poker. Poker is not a results oriented game. It's a process oriented game. If you make the right decisions, you still may lose the hand, just because of the luck of the draw. But if you present yourself in an interview setting in the most genuine, authentic way possible, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to move forward. Now we just have to get people comfortable, being their genuine, authentic selves. And I think the people who perform best understand that and are that, when they sit down across from me.
Man, I'll tell you, as you were saying again, Mitch, like, you picking on me or you picking on again, as a point of reference, I'm more comfortable in my own skin today as as the owner of this company than I've ever been, because I'm just being myself, and I'm not worried about necessarily what other people think. Not necessarily worried about, well, is this the direction they should be going? Yeah. This is what we're doing. And we're excited about it. We're super passionate about it. And it's exciting to think about 6 months from now, a year from now. And, for everybody that has listened and been a big supporter, I mean, I can't thank you enough. Like, it's such a fun feeling to be, in a position where you can talk about the industry in the way that we can, that I know most superintendents don't get that opportunity to, because of governance, because of, employment, aspects and privacy concerns. It's something that I feel really passionate about, and we feel really honored to serve in that capacity. And that's something that I'm more self-aware of today than maybe before. And I think that's what makes this thing work, makes this podcast work, and makes what we do work, because our interests are on behalf of the club, but also for the agronomy team, because it's such an underserved department. And yeah, it's just been fun. And I think of so many different, success stories this year, whether it's the clients we've served, the candidates we've placed, the candidates that we didn't place and still feel like we're a part of their journey. The scholarship program. And that's something that sometimes gets lost, just being able to help serve in that capacity. And you were a huge part of spearheading that as well. Any other initiatives or any other things you think of, like what we should be doing, what we haven't been doing, or just want to give a shout out on anything specific?
I spent a lot of your money this year, man. That you probably don't want me coming up with ways to spend more of your money. I'll say this about the scholarship. The response we got from the scholarship this year was overwhelming. I did not expect that we were going to reach the level that we did, of that. Number one, that caused me to do a lot of reading, which was great. Like it was great. And I love to hear people's stories. And I met some really cool kids, along the way too, and some really cool young adults who are doing this as a second career and transitioning. And I can empathize with them, a little bit as they're going through this process. But man, I cannot wait to run through the second iteration of the scholarship, just because of the people, that we met and the people whose lives we were able to touch with that.
Yeah. Well, that plays it right into, again, not to speak too much about the summit, but our goal there being at the university is that we do have students that get an opportunity to interact and network as well. I think that that's a really key component, and kind of have that, I think, as one of my friends called it, cradle to grave kind of approach. You're kind of hitting all levels of professionals and aspiring professionals. So I agree. I think that scholarship, for those listening, we had over, I think, 30, maybe 40 applicants total from all over the country. And it's super inspiring. That day when we notified those individuals about, the scholarship that they had won, was, feeling really positive about that we were contributing to something bigger than just, Bloom Golf, but really helping impact somebody get going a little bit more. And, a post from that, which was kind of unexpected, we got introduced to the Outpost Foundation. So if anybody here's listening, outside of looking forward to our scholarship program, the Outpost Foundation, gives scholarships to employees at clubs all over the country. And they're really looking for people that have more of a focus on turf management. They're looking for people that want to, pursue this, but may not be able to. So they're probably gainfully employed by a club. They want to go on to an online program or something like that. An advanced certificate program, whatever the case may be. Really awesome downstream effect of starting our scholarship is somebody else actually said, hey, we'd love to see how we can partner on this. So anybody listening, you got employees, keep tabs on both Bloom Golf and the Outpost Foundation. Really pumped for that as well.
Absolutely. Like that has been the one consistent for us, Tyler, from the day that I started, that August day in 2021, to where we are now, is we wanted to help clubs and operations build from within. And these are two things, the scholarship we've offered, the Outpost Foundation, are things that are going to help operations build from within by investing in their people. And I'm happy that we're able to invest in some of these people as well, and just have our tiny little fingerprint on it just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, proud of, as a last second shout out, super proud of our team. And then the things that they've done, Ryan, Mary, Meredith, Mitch. It's been a real fun journey. And there's been other contributors, that have been a part of this journey, throughout the years. So I really appreciate that. But look forward to hopefully seeing everybody October 12th in State College. And Mitch, any other closing comments or questions that maybe you wanted to ask me that I haven't thought about?
No, not really. I mean, like we're the next 6 months I'm super excited for. I said the last 6 months have been as much fun as I've had professionally in my entire life. And the next 6 months, I'm really looking forward to getting down to New Orleans. We got some fun things going on down there as well that we're already starting to think about. It's gonna be a fun, busy 6 months, and I can't wait to see what's gonna happen.
Yeah, football season's here, man. Fall is in the air. State College, I think we've got a little bit higher vibes than we've had in a number of years. But to be disappointed, I'm sure, by midseason once again.
Now you're going to have to blame a new coach, though. So you have to think of new things to complain about with a new coach.
No. See, this is it's like a superintendent turnover. You basically got 1 year. You got 1 year that you could still blame the old coach. So Franklin still got some residue from that departure. So
new stadium too. Like the renovation should be done, right?
It looks awesome. Yeah, they still have some upgrades to finalize, I think in the next year, but the core of like what they were doing is done. So kudos to that group, man. I'll tell you, it's been fun watching that get built over the last, 2 years. And those guys are hustling. I mean, that crew is winter, freezing, heat. Man, they're cranking here in the last few weeks. So super pumped about that. But yeah, appreciate everybody joining in today. As always, Tyler Bloom and Mitch Rupert joining in, and we'll be in touch with everyone soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.